Metroid Prime 4 should come out this year. Why? Because it's 2024. But really, I've been reflecting on this ever since the rumor went out that the Nintendo Switch 2 was delayed to early 2025. This bummed me out because I, like many others, assumed that Metroid Prime 4 would end up being a launch title for the Switch 2 alongside an original Switch version. But then that got me thinking, does this actually make sense? Would Nintendo have enough incentive to release a new Metroid game on a console launch instead of a new Mario or Zelda? Even if they do, I believe Nintendo has a big opportunity here that could possibly make Metroid Prime 4 the biggest hit of 2024. Yes, this year. But first, I want to explore the widespread assumption that Metroid Prime 4 could be a cross-generation release between Switch 1 and Switch 2, or whatever it ends up being called. Obviously, this hasn't been confirmed by Nintendo, but it's an admittedly sound theory. After all, the game has been in development for so long, they might as well just hold it off for the next platform, right? Especially as Nintendo has already seen great success with this formula, with The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess releasing on both the GameCube and Wii, and then again with Breath of the Wild on Wii U and Switch. And it's probably no coincidence that each game wound up being the best-selling title in the series upon their release. Surely that means Metroid Prime 4 could see a similar fate if it released cross-gen, right? Well, let's crunch the numbers. Twilight Princess was undoubtedly helped by releasing on one of the best-selling game consoles of all time, the Wii, selling 8.8 million copies on that platform alone, with GameCube selling only 1.3 mil. The previous best-selling Zelda was Ocarina of Time at 7.6, so Twilight Princess broke that record just on Wii alone. As for Breath of the Wild, the Switch version sold over 31 million copies as of last year, whereas the Wii U version sold a mere 1.7. So the reason these games sold well was more because they released on hugely successful platforms and not specifically because they were cross-gen. To drive the point further, the GameCube and the Wii U were not successful consoles, and it would have been a financial disaster to release Twilight Princess and Breath of the Wild exclusively on them when both systems were at the tail end of their lifespans. And with Zelda being one of Nintendo's tentpole franchises, these games only added to the hype of the new machines. Now, is it possible that Metroid Prime 4 could see similar success if it follows the cross-gen release strategy? I mean, it could. But there's one problem. Metroid is sadly no Zelda when it comes to sales, so launching a new console with a new Zelda game is a safer bet to ensure both the software and hardware sell well. In Breath of the Wild's case, many bought a Switch just to play that one game, and it certainly helps that the concept of the Switch was something everyone found exciting at the time, being the first true handheld home console hybrid. So there's a good chance even non-Zelda fans bought that must-play game to go with their hot new system. And this is where I could see a dual release work out for Metroid Prime 4. Those buying the Switch 2 might see this presumably beautiful-looking first-person shooter and think, wow, that seems like a cool game to play with my new console, and pick it up. Perhaps the hype of a new console could entice buyers into playing Metroid Prime 4. Unless other launch titles steal its thunder, like a new 3D Mario, Mario Kart 9, Mario Wonder Deluxe, Super Mario Galaxy 2, Mario Teaches Typing 3. You see what I'm saying? Why would Nintendo bother saving Metroid Prime 4 as a Switch 2 launch title when they will likely have significantly more successful franchises ready to go for launch to ensure the system gets the attention of early adopters? Now, one might think that being the successor to the third best-selling game platform of all time would be enough to sell units, but history has proven otherwise plenty of times, most recently with the Wii to Wii U transition. In fact, every single Nintendo successor has sold less than its predecessor, making the Switch 2 transition a pretty big risk, especially in this economy where it might take even more to convince people to shell out hundreds of dollars for a brand new system when their current one still works just fine. Nintendo will have to rely on true Switch 2 exclusives to sell their new device, and Metroid, regrettably, is historically not a system seller. Collectively, the Metroid series has sold a combined total of just over 21 million units, which sounds impressive at first, until you realize that's spread across 17 games in a 37-year period. And even that total is way less than just one Mario or Zelda, such as Super Mario Odyssey and Breath of the Wild respectively. So if Metroid Prime 4 were to go cross-gen, only the most hardcore fans would buy the new console just to play the best version of it, which simply isn't a big enough audience for a major new Nintendo platform, because they want people lining up for miles to get the Switch 2. This is especially true if the aforementioned rumor of it being internally delayed to 2025 is to be believed. Multiple sources such as VGC, Eurogamer, and Bloomberg have corroborated this report from Brazilian journalist Pedro Henrique Lutalipe, suggesting the delay is to ensure a strong launch lineup of first-party titles. Assuming it's true, I see an opportunity for Nintendo to make a big splash with Metroid Prime 4 this year on the Switch you already own, instead of saving it for a new console. As is, 2024 is shaping up to be a slower year for Nintendo, with us only knowing 3 of their upcoming first-party games: Princess Peach Showtime, Luigi's Mansion 2 HD, and Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door, all of which are set in the Mario universe. We normally get more info around this time with a February Direct, but instead, we got a partner showcase. Now, the same Brazilian journalist is claiming there will be a proper Nintendo Direct in April, so it seems like things are shaking up over at Nintendo HQ. Point is, 2024 seems like the perfect year to release Metroid Prime 4, assuming it's ready. There's likely not going to be much competition from Xbox or PlayStation, especially with PlayStation recently confirming they will have no major franchise releases during the next year, and Nintendo itself likely to have a smaller slate as it readies up for the transition, including during the holidays, which is their most important sales period of the year. If they were to release Metroid Prime 4 as their big holiday title, with it receiving critical acclaim, the amount of attention on it would be astounding, possibly lining up to be a Game of the Year nominee at multiple outlets and award shows. Do you find that hard to believe? Well, it already happened with Metroid Dread. It came out during a pretty slow season for games during the final quarter of the year and was met with critical acclaim, even garnering a Game of the Year nom at the Game Awards and winning Best Action Adventure. Of course, there's no guarantee that Metroid Prime 4 will receive similar praise, except there is, because it's being developed by Retro Freaking Studios, developers of some of the most acclaimed games of all time, like the Metroid Prime trilogy. Furthermore, Metroid Dread went on to become the best-selling Metroid game of all time at just over 3 million copies. The fact that it reached that milestone while being a $60 side-scroller was impressive. And this only strengthens the case for Metroid Prime 4 releasing on the current Switch. It demonstrates a clear desire for Metroid games on this platform, more so than any previous console, and that's proven even further with Metroid Prime Remastered selling over 1 million units almost immediately after shadow dropping on Switch with no pre-release marketing. In fact, there's an interesting pattern when it comes to the best-selling Metroid games. All 3 marked a new direction for the series after a long hiatus. Metroid was, of course, the first ever Metroid game and basically invented Metroidvania as a concept. Then Metroid Prime was the first ever 3D Metroid, releasing 8 years after the previous game, and then Dread was the first entirely new 2D Metroid after a nearly 20-year break. Point is, whenever there's a major change in directions after a really long hiatus, these games wind up becoming best sellers. Which leads us to Metroid Prime 4, the first new first-person 3D Metroid in 17 years, combined with some heavy pre-release marketing like Dread had, and releasing on Nintendo's best-selling console ever, the Nintendo Switch. Put that all together, and you may just have the perfect storm to create the new best-selling Metroid game ever. Still, I've heard many arguments against Metroid Prime 4 launching on Switch. Some have said it should skip the Switch entirely and launch exclusively on Switch 2, but I find this unlikely. It was announced for Switch, therefore it will be on Switch come hell or high water, similar to how Twilight Princess and Breath of the Wild still launched on their original systems. Some people bring up the lesser sales of Samus Returns as an example of why not to release a game during the tail end of a system's lifespan, but I don't think it's quite that simple. For one, the Switch was already on the market for 6 months when Samus Returns came out, and many had clearly moved on from the 3DS. Not to mention, it wasn't an entirely new Metroid, instead being a remake of the 25-year-old Metroid 2. Then there was the whole ordeal with the fan remake of that same game, AM2R, being taken down due to legal threats from Nintendo, which could have impacted the hype surrounding the game. It was just a messy ordeal all around, and I don't see Metroid Prime 4 suffering that same fate. mainly because, unlike the 3DS, more people than ever are still playing on Switch, even 7 years later, as reported by Nintendo's latest financial earnings showing 122 million people played the Switch over the past year. Now, obviously, not every single one of these users are going to pick up Metroid Prime 4, but that's still a huge demographic Nintendo would be silly to ignore, especially for a series that historically hasn't sold systems. Furthermore, I also don't believe that a game releasing during the last year of a console's life is doomed to fail. Just look at how the PS4 received 2 juggernaut hits just 6 months before the PlayStation 5 released, and they still sold remarkably well. And you know what? They eventually found a new life on PlayStation 5, with them receiving next-gen patches enabling better performance, along with special editions that added new modes. And that same thing could happen with Metroid Prime 4. Launch it on Switch 1 this year, then give it a next-gen patch once the Switch 2 launches to make it look better. Hell, it might even act as an incentive for existing owners to upgrade to the Switch 2 just to see how Metroid Prime 4 performs on it. And if backwards compatibility doesn't exist for the system, Nintendo could give it a Switch 2 SKU, title it a Definitive or Game of the Year edition, include a new mode or two, and now you've just made a cross-gen release and probably sold even more. Finally, another argument I constantly hear is that Metroid Prime 4 will be held back by Switch 1, and it would be best for it to launch exclusively on Switch 2. And to that I say, have you seen Metroid Prime Remastered? I used to worry about what Metroid Prime 4 would look like on the current Switch, but after playing this, all my concerns shriveled up like foie gras during that boss battle.
I was in the pool! I was in the pool!
You guys, Metroid Prime 4 is going to look and run great no matter what console it's on. Have faith in Retro Studios. They delivered what is arguably the best looking Switch game despite it being based on a 20-year-old game engine, so why would we expect Prime 4 to be any different? Yeah, it's not going to have 4K ray tracing or whatever, but I played this 900p game on my 4K TV and it still blew my mind. I would be more than satisfied playing Metroid Prime 4 on my current Switch and then jumping over to the Switch 2 version later with all those fancy bells and whistles. It's a Metroid game. Of course I'm going to play it over and over again until my thumbs bleed. But there is my reasoning for why Metroid Prime 4 should release in 2024. If by chance the rumors are wrong and the Switch 2 comes out this year, I could see them doing a cross-gen release for the sake of convenience, but if not, releasing it on the current Switch makes too much sense. There likely won't be much sales competition this holiday, the Switch player count is at its peak, and most importantly, fans get to play it sooner. Seriously, we're coming up on 7 years since the announcement. Throw us a bone here, Nintendo! If Metroid Prime 4 is ready, then it's prime time to release it on the platform it was announced for. Now what do you think? Is 2024 the best time for Metroid Prime 4? Let me know in the comments, and until next time, bye-bye.